Welcome to the opening ceremony of the 2023 Zeroing Methane Emissions Datathon, organized by SLB Calgary here, Untapped Energy, and CHOA, the Canadian Heavy Oil Association. I'm David Shackleton, one of the organizers. I'd like to acknowledge that we're here on Treaty 7 territory. These lands are home to the Stoney and Nakota nations of the Wesley, Chiniki, and Bearspaw, three nations of the Blackfoot Confederacy, and the Piikani, Kainai, and Siksika, and the Tsuut'ina of the Dene people. Treaty 7 is also shared with the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. We acknowledge the past, the present, and the future generations of these nations that help us steward this land, as well as honor and celebrate this place. I'm David Shackleton. I work for SLB, which is the new name for Schlumberger, if you've not caught up with the new branding. I spoke a bit about the new branding last time, so I won't go through that, but it's pretty interesting, the new branding, the new logo. Well, actually, the first time I've ever had a logo. Do look into that. We'll look at the recording from the kickoff, but I won't go through that now. But I also represent SLB Calgary, the current chair of Calgary section. We're about 2,500 members here in Calgary, globally about 100,000, mostly engineers. And interesting for us here, we've got technical sections that operate on a global level. So as part of SBE in Calgary here, you have access to these global technical communities that are focused on lots of different areas of the petroleum industry and beyond. We're very much moving into new energies, reducing carbon, and lots of different technical sections that relate to what we're looking at here, methane emissions. There's one new technical section specifically on methane emissions management. There's another one on flow assurance, measurement. There's one on carbon capture. And yeah, in terms of new energy, we're looking at geothermal. There's a section dedicated to hydrogen. There's kind of something for everybody, technically at a global level.
Welcome to this event, the opening ceremony for the competition. Well, I'm part of Sensia. Sensia is a joint venture between SLB and Rockwell Automation. I'm also part of SPE, but today just gonna give you a few words on behalf of CHOA. CHOA, the Canadian Heavy Oil Association. And the name reflects actually the history of the association. It has been around over 35 years, focusing on the core of our industry over here, the energy industry in Alberta. However, we also, even though heavy oil is the history, but it's also up to date with all the latest technology. And we're relaunching our technical talks. It's going to be breakfast and lunch, similar to the talks with SPE, but complementing it. And we're launching it under the name of CHOA Learns Energy Change Makers. And actually, the first one is going to be on February 16th, focused on geothermal. I want to tell you that the organizers worked hard to organize this event for you for the competition, and want to wish you all best of luck. And please, enjoy the competition and wish you all to win.
My name is Tim Chan. I'm one of the co-founders and directors of Untapped Energy Association, which is a federally registered nonprofit organization that supports a membership of data and analytics practitioners found all across the energy industry. And in fact, our starting point was a Datathon back in 2018. And I recognize a few of you that were actually there for our very first one. And certainly now that we have a chance to partner with some of these other awesome organizations, it's just meant that this event has had a chance to scale and increase in quality. And so we absolutely hope that everyone has a great experience through this. So as we recognize that there is a transition that's happening, because when we first started this was actually a datathon for the oil and gas industry. But a lot has happened in the last 5 years, and we can certainly see that there's been more of a move towards an energy transition. And so if you take a look at some of the datathons that and the challenges that we've tackled in the last 5 years, these are really important issues. So all of you are here today because you want to be part of this experience. And so Untapped Energy seeks to upskill its members in the area of data analytics and data science, so that not only can you remain relevant in the profession that you're in, but you can actually become a significant contributor. And so how we do that is we organize events like this to build up data culture through datathons. We also have monthly meetups. So we meet on the third Tuesday of each month. So shout out to our next meetup, which will be February 21st at the Suncor Energy Center. We have Dr. Vincent Chu speaking about IoT controls. And we like to build community. So we organize a number of different networking events all throughout the calendar. So if you want to lean more into this particular community, feel free to reach out to us, untappedergy.ca. Okay, now I get to talk a little bit about why we're all doing this. Hopefully by now, you have made the decision to participate in this datathon, which means that you have registered as a participant. Because today's like the starting line, right? The gun's about to go off, and hopefully you have your race bib and your running shoes are tied up and you're ready to go. So obviously there's some benefits that you see in participating in an event like this, where you get to use real data, you get to tackle a real problem. Maybe even more importantly, you get to meet other people that are just as enthusiastic and passionate as you are about using data to solve problems. So you'll find that throughout the course of the Datathon, you'll have a chance to dive into different data science practices. You'll get to learn about machine learning. You'll get to do some data storytelling, because that's a big part of it as well too. And at the end of it, we all have an opportunity to then make a presentation about your particular approach to a panel of experts. And what a great way of reinforcing your brand, getting yourself out there, and being able to share openly what it is that you have uncovered with you and your team during this event. So registration, if you haven't yet, is open until February 12th. So we're hoping that throughout the course of the next few days, you'll also continue to learn more about this event. But you are able to register for this event all the way up until February the 12th. One of the key features or special features of this year's event is that everyone who joins, and maybe this will entice you to register if you haven't, is that all participants will receive a personal digital wallet. So this is built on blockchain technology, allows you to kind of keep track of all of your designations and credentials, allows you to share it. So in the event that you're interviewing for a job and you need to prove what your qualifications are, well, this is a type of tool that allows you to do that. Okay. And then finally, there's prizes. We kind of leave this at the bottom because the prizes are nice, so are bragging rights. And so for the top teams, there will be cash prizes available. But we do hope that also you get a great learning experience out of participating in this as well.
I just wanted to acknowledge our sponsors for this event. So as you know, and I mentioned this in the kickoff for those who are there, this event costs money to run. The food you're eating, the various things we need to do throughout the event to make it a success. What's really cool is a lot of these sponsors have been with us since before I was involved in these datathons. So Northwest Capital actually supported the first datathon ever done in Calgary. They're sponsoring again this year in conjunction with Cube. Cube, you'll see a little video on Cube later. They're a continuous measurement solution for methane emissions, if I got that right, Alex. Alex, the CEO, is over there. We also have Suncor again contributing, and many of the Suncor team here today. You'll hear from Sam very soon. They're building a pretty impressive, or built a pretty impressive analytics organization within Suncor. And also WestGen, Obsidian, ITIQ. Again, we thank those sponsors. Without them, we won't be able to do this.
The energy industry is under growing pressure to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. Operators are taking action by implementing a variety of technologies to detect and monitor emissions, including satellites, drones, handheld OGI cameras, and continuous monitoring devices. Continuous monitoring is uniquely suited to help operators reduce emissions. It's always on and always tracking, 365 days a year, providing a number of benefits to operators, including the immediate detection of emissions when they occur, improved tracking of leaks over time, and better cost effectiveness. At Cube, we aim to be the industry's most cost-effective continuous monitoring technology provider. We combine on-site devices, powerful AI, and informative analytical dashboards into a complete solution for detecting, quantifying, and managing emissions. Each Cube device can detect a variety of gases, including methane, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and volatile organic compounds. Anemometers on each device assess the localization impact of wind over time, resulting in more accurate quantification and localization of emissions. LTE communication ensures that data can be transmitted continuously from most locations, while modern edge computing optimizes data granularity, which helps to lower both power and data transmission costs. Cube Axon devices can be set up in less than 30 minutes and are designed for deployment in extreme environments. They are solar-powered with rechargeable backup batteries capable of running each device for up to 2 weeks without any light at all. Cube Axons are placed purposefully around your operating site to ensure that sufficient data is captured around high-risk equipment with as few devices as possible. Cube's algorithms quantify detected emissions and attribute emissions rates and volumes to sources on site. The physics-guided artificial intelligence infers the quantity, location, and classification of each leak, helping you to determine which ones to prioritize for repair. Cube's high-fidelity data models and inferences are all visually summarized in cloud-based dashboards, available for real-time emissions monitoring, maintenance planning, and regulatory compliance reporting. Cube Technologies offers the industry's most cost-effective solution for emissions reduction through continuous monitoring. Learn how other operators are managing their emissions at www.cubeiot.com.
We did one methane emissions boot camp a few days ago here in the lecture theatre at SLB. And as a participant, you'll have access to a recording of that. If you weren't there at the time, I think about 45 people showed up online for that. So perhaps you were, but that recording is available. That's an introduction to methane emissions, which facilities or pieces of equipment emit methane, focused in oil and gas, that presentation was. So that'll be useful for you to look back at as a reference. And in that presentation, Glenn also talks about ways of mitigating or avoiding methane emissions. So again, that's another source for that kind of solution. We'll also have hopefully a presentation just generally on emissions, not just specifically methane emissions, but more generally on emissions. And also this mini course, Introduction to Deep Learning. Marcelo's only available from the 15th of February, so it's a little bit late, but it's in about a week. So that's where you can learn about how to start processing these images. And then there'll be opportunities for us to hang out and talk about whatever you want in these in-person hangouts. And we've got a virtual hangout tomorrow lunchtime as well. I'll just go back to this one. So yeah, here we are, competition launch, 6th of Feb. So we do have almost a week where the competition registration will stay open. So this is your time. If you're panicking about not having team members, go out and find some, encourage them to sign up, register, encourage friends, colleagues to register. They've got almost a week to do that. So we'll leave that open till Sunday night. And then a couple of weeks later, the competition will close. Last year, the competition was open for 2 weeks, and we got feedback that if only there was one more week, we could have done better. if you've ever been a student, or I don't know, everyone procrastinates, right? So maybe give yourself 2 weeks and you'll have a bonus third week. I don't know. But also thinking about this workshop on deep learning is only next week. So perhaps as you're planning your time here, I don't know if if you remember, but there are 2 parts to this competition. We'll go over this in a little more detail later. The first part is heavily quantitative, where you're building a model that we'll test with a kind of mystery data set. The second part, which is worth most of the points, 70%, is actually more qualitative, looking at your understanding of the problem beyond data science, and looking at you mitigating or suggesting mitigations for reducing the methane emissions that you're observing, right? So perhaps you want to be thinking about that. If you're not sure where to start with computer, what's it called? Computer vision, yeah. If you're not sure where to start with that, perhaps you can look in the next week at the second part of the more qualitative aspects of the competition, and then come back to the more quantitative
I've
part.
had a chance to chat with a few of you, and you've already shared some of your experience so far, and it ranges anywhere from excited to frustrated. Some of you may not have gotten together in your teams yet, and that's okay, even though we're starting off today. So I invite you to join any of those hangouts. That's a great way of connecting with people. We also have an event Slack channel as well too, and that's a really good way of determining who else out there is maybe looking for someone else to join a team with. So many different ways that you can get together. And it's not going to be easy. You will go through a bit of a roller coaster ride throughout this entire experience. There's going to be moments where you feel elated because you feel like you've cracked something. And then there'll be moments where you just feel like you're going to quit because it seems so difficult. But I can assure you that if you stick with it to the end, the outcome will be one of the most memorable experiences that you've ever had.
Thank you all very much for having me this evening, and thank you for coming. Thank you also for the time you have already invested and will invest in this very important problem statement. It's always wonderful to hear yourself bigged up in expectations by someone else before you speak, but thank you, Tim, for the kind introduction. As Tim mentioned, for the last 3.5 years, I've been leading the stand-up of the analytics business at Suncor, and really tonight what I'm hoping to do is share some of that experience with you in a way that might be useful, both as you approach this particular challenge, but I think also as you think about your career or potential career in data and analytics and where you are on that journey and maybe where you'd like to end up on that journey. So really just to set a little bit of context for this evening, I'm a big Winston Churchill fan. And he said, "I'm always ready to learn, although I seldom like being taught." So I think I can certainly relate to that, as maybe many of us can, which is we're often willing to change, but we're incredibly sensitive to the context in which those opportunities are presented to us. Context matters a great deal. And, good storytelling always needs context. Our favorite stories never start with the ending. They build color and they build intrigue as they go. Compelling someone to action needs context, right? For those of us with kids or spouses, how often does "because I said so" work, right? Never. It's incredibly important that when we're trying to compel somebody to action, context, again, matters a great deal. I guess really what I want to say is the rationale for what we want to achieve and delivering that in a context that demonstrates we have understood the perspective of those we're trying to convince of doing something is critical. It's of the utmost importance. Many of us are here because we believe in the power of data in terms of how we tell those stories and how we compel people to action. We want to create insights that are inspiring to an audience so that they can't wait to get out and do the thing we're trying to convince them of doing. So the premise for what I want to talk about this evening is that insights are most valuable, they are most compelling when they are delivered in the right context. So hopefully that that makes sense. So I think the Datathon is already a great approach because this group of people has come together with an aligned goal, right? That's an excellent place to start, zeroing methane emissions. What I can tell you as maybe a slight aside, but in my experience, one of those most important red flags you can teach yourself to listen to is if your spidey senses are telling you that a group of people are coming together either without a common understanding of the problem statement or worse still, potentially conflicting objectives. That could be a topic for another day, but certainly that's a lesson that we've all, on my team, certainly learned the hard way on a couple of occasions. There are lots of models and frameworks out there that explain context. This is my version of hopefully a simple frame that you can use as a tool, as I said, both in the context of coming together on this problem, but also as you think about and progress through your own involvement with data and analytics. Business operations or the organizational context. These are some questions you want to ask yourself. I think they're probably self-explanatory, but is there leadership support for what I'm about to do? Are we well funded? Are we well resourced? Are we 11th on the top 10 priority list? Where are we? Do we have a track record in this space, or are we actually starting out fresh, right? Is this going to be new to a lot of people? Data context is probably something we're all familiar with. Many of us in the room will be used to thinking about data hygiene, and we're thinking about how's my quality, how's my completeness, how old is the data set I'm working with, where did it come from, what's my level of trust in it, has it been manipulated or cleansed? But we also want to broaden the aperture a little bit and think about what is this data actually telling me? How aligned is it with the prevailing view of strategy or the conventional wisdom of the operating context of what I'm trying to solve for? How big a change are we talking about? How's this going to be received? I think the macro environment as well is probably self-explanatory. You're always approaching problems, approaching teams within the societal or regulatory or economic or industry context, certainly very relevant to the problem that you are all about to embark on solving. I think for me, what many models miss is you. What context are you bringing to the problem that you're attempting to solve for? What are you bringing to this team of people that may be forming up for the first time? So really, that's what I'd like to dive into a little bit more this evening. As I get into this model, maybe think about it not just in relation to the problem of solving for methane emissions, but also relating it to where you might be on your journey with data and analytics and where you might want to go eventually on that journey. So maybe just think about the model in terms of the roles or personas or those kind of archetypes that it may fit into. Obviously, I'm generalizing to a great extent, but hopefully this is just a simple frame to apply some tools to your own situation. If we take discovery, you're really at the start of your journey. You might be seeking understanding. You're looking to evaluate if something is worth your time and effort. And Tim, I think you touched on that earlier in terms of hopefully many of you have maybe crossed through that phase for this particular problem, and you've made the decision that you do want to invest that time and effort. As you move into that explorer phase, you might consider, okay, I've seen the value. I'm committed to learning. You're starting to find your strengths. You're starting to find your gaps. Then moving into really that idea of I'm a practitioner in this space. You have the skills, you're actively applying them to the context of the problem. You're bringing that practitioner lens to the team that you're participating in. The evolution of that then in terms of being a guide is really you're starting to look at, okay, I can lead people, I can coach people in the domain that I operate in. You're starting to orient mixed teams towards new problems that are going to show up against the opportunity. So I'll dive a little deeper into those quadrants. And as I said, this is hopefully where I can start to share some of the things I recommend you think about based on how I've seen this work evolve at Suncor over the last 3+ years. So firstly, know your why, right? Why are you approaching this journey? Why are you wanting to hopefully invest that time in discovery? You know, you have to know your own opportunity context. You have to understand the problem that you're approaching, and you have to know, why am I open to discovering something new in the first place? And you have to be honest with yourself, which is, am I really interested in the topic? Did your boss tell you to? Is it about advancing your career, right? There's a lot of interest in data and analytics because it's viewed as a great career path. Well, I would say, again, word to the wise, you have to love it, right? If you force yourself into data and analytics as a career opportunity without loving it, it can be quite short-lived. So that passion has to be there. Keeping an open mind is a really important one as you start on the journey, right? You don't, this isn't about solving problems the way you always have done, right? It's about being open to learning how you can approach problems differently, learning from the skills of others. And it's not necessarily about the lens of the particular domain that you bring with you, right? So that, I think the broader you can have your aperture as you come into this process, the more valuable an experience you'll find it to be. Know the experience you bring. So it's kind of a counterpoint to the last one, which is, you're here because you have expertise. You have a lot of value you can offer. The important thing is not to, you're not showing up to convince others or educate, and you don't have to know going in how your experience and skill set may be valuable or relevant. You just have to know what it is and be ready to discover how it could be relevant to what you're approaching. And then that last one, I think maybe Tim touched on a flavor of this, but manage feeling overwhelmed, right? It's a daunting space, or it can be, right? We're talking about a very broad field that can feel complex and overwhelming at the beginning. It is a massive, ever expanding domain. I highly encourage you to set realistic expectations for yourself at the start of your journey. So moving on to, all right, you're now in your Magellan, the front of your ship at the start of your grand adventure. So I think one thing to think about here is how you balance a value focus versus the ability to experiment, or the willingness to experiment. One way to frame it would be to value creativity over discipline. Don't let yourself be too constrained at the start of your journey. There's a great article by McKinsey, which Sheldon sent my way, which kind of talks about the importance of balancing the tension between the want to be creative, but also the discipline and rigor of execution and good strategies, how you balance those things. So it's very relevant to that explorer piece of your journey, which is be open to experimentation. Don't stifle innovation, creativity early on. Be willing to take a few chances. Maybe building on a point from before, look to complement your experience. So this is really about, I guess another way to say it would be, choose wisely where you spend your time, right? As I said, it's a very large field. There's lots of things that will look interesting and compelling. Try and narrow in, or what are those skills or competencies that are going to enhance or amplify what I know I'm bringing to the table, and think about how to invest that way. The final one, super important one in this context, ask for help. This is the perfect time to do that. You can't and won't know everything, and be comfortable with that going in. I think it's important. It's okay to be a little bit vulnerable, right? That doesn't always feel great, but I think this in particular is a wonderful forum to be a little bit vulnerable and ask questions and learn from peers. It's not always an opportunity we get, so take full advantage of it in the context of this Datathon, but also practice it in your careers, right? It does take some bravery to say you don't know, but I think certainly my experience, and I would say the experience of my team, is you get a lot more out of it when you're willing to be a little bit vulnerable, a little bit brave, and hold up your hand and ask for help. I would say I can definitely speak for my team, where I don't think I've ever witnessed a bad response to somebody asking to learn more. Right? You will always find people that are generous with their experience and wisdom. Into the practitioner phase. So I think this really is about build your business knowledge where you can, right? The thinking of that idea of compelling insights, like the best professionals I've experienced in data and analytics, the ones that really differentiate themselves are the ones that really understand the business context, the P&L, the profit and loss context of where they're operating. Usually they distinguish themselves very quickly. So knowing where to apply your expertise effectively is extremely valuable. The downside of that, you can waste a lot of time doing the right work in the wrong place. So that idea of where to match up your expertise and effort to where it will truly make a difference is extremely important. And that comes with knowing the business that you're operating. And as I said, I think a career point, that differentiator, the best practitioners are the ones who get the context of where their work adds value. Similar point, know your gaps. Again, right, we love to think we know a lot, and we love to seek extra knowledge, and we want to be knowledgeable about what we're talking about with peers and with colleagues. Thinking we need to know everything is a fast track to failure, because we can't. Like that is an unrealistic and impossible expectation to put on yourself and also on others, right? We can't hold others to that benchmark within a team. Otherwise, we're essentially setting them up to fail. Collaboration. This is a tough one. It's very easy to say, it's very easy to talk about the key skills that make that possible, but this is by far the hardest thing. And it takes a lot of practice. I am still practicing this. My collaboration with my peer group, there's a ton of work I can do in that space. And honestly, I struggle with it every week. So don't think this is easy, but if you're going to pick a skill set to invest in that will really set you up for success, knowing how to be an effective and compelling collaborator is a really great place to start. Let me break it down a little bit. I think there's the ability to work with multiple disciplines is paramount, right? The best projects I've seen are where you get the right skill mix of people that are bringing different competencies that meld perfectly for the problem statement you're trying to solve for. So get good at working with other disciplines and recognizing the value of those skills. I think if I was to talk about maybe the golden soft skills is, how do you educate simply? How do you communicate clearly? How do you listen very precisely? Those are the golden skills to collaboration. If you get those three things right, you'll reap rewards in terms of how you work with others. I think, and the final thing, and I don't know if there's any Brene Brown fans in the room, but empathy will always help you through. No matter what team you're on, everyone is going through similar things to you are. They may have different domain expertise, but they're just as worried about their gaps in knowledge as you are. If you're dealing with a highly complex problem, it's not simple to some and complex to you. It's complex for everybody. So being able to empathize that pretty much everybody is going to be going through some similar version of what you are will always help you be a more effective collaborator, whether you're in a highly established team or a team that's just forming. Moving on to the Zen master of analytics, your guiding and coaching. Still a lot to learn in this space. And I should say this is a continuous and virtuous cycle, because just when we think we're great guides, we're going to learn a whole bunch of other contexts that we have to rediscover again. Every time you're taking on a new role or a new challenge, you're going to find yourself evaluating this journey again. So what does it mean to be an effective guide and coach and leader in this space? I think, as it says there, leading through ambiguity and uncertainty. You are always going to find that when we're tackling hard problems, tackling new problems. And one thing that's important is absolutely not everybody likes to work this way, right? High change, high uncertainty, high ambiguity environments are typically not where the majority of people like to work. So you have to be conscious of that as you think about the patience and persistence with which you have to approach some of the people relationships, and also, your expectations of yourself in terms of how quickly you'll get to results. I would say leading people through change is definitely the hardest thing I've ever done in my career, and it takes constant practice, and you'll never get it right twice in a row. So all you can ask for is to build your skill set of how you lead through change. I think really what marks the difference here is your effort profile. As a practitioner, you're 70% doing. In your guide, you're 70% leading others, and that's where the bulk of your time is going to be focused. Some behaviors that will help you and help your team is keep asking yourself, how can I simplify? How can I add clarity? And I think importantly, and I kind of touched on it before, is it's an overused term, but how can I create psychological safety for people who don't always feel secure in these high ambiguity, high change, high complexity environments? That's your role as a guide, is to create a space where people can learn from one another, express some of that vulnerability I talked about earlier. Skill blending. This is one I've learned a lot about in the last 3 years, is how do you focus on the right mix of skills, experience, styles? This to me is what we mean when we say diversity. This is what it means. Differences of background, differences of experience, differences of skill set. And when you get the right blend of that around a problem statement is where I find the magic really happens. There's no one way answer to some of these complex problems. Keep testing yourself within that blend of diverse skills. Have you got respectful discourse? That's a really great way of testing if you've brought together the right mix of opinions. Is you shouldn't be agreeing with each other all the time, but there should be a healthy discourse, not a discounted of others' skills, opinions, experiences. So keep testing yourself on whether or not you're hearing that at the tables that you sit at. Defend up. I'll explain what this means. So very often you're going to have to defend your approach to problems. You're going to have to defend whether or not the value you think is there is really there. You're going to have to defend your ways of working. You might have to defend your attitude towards risk. Typically, these teams are going to have a higher risk tolerance than some of the organizations they're working with. Many leaders that you interact with will not have got where they are by working this way. So it's important to realize that oftentimes your role of selling up is to someone for whom working this way might be fairly unfamiliar. Structuring teams this way might be unfamiliar. This idea of iteratively working through ambiguity and risk. I can't tell you what the ROI is right now. I don't know yet. Well, it's a very uncomfortable conversation for leaders that haven't grown up this way. So the other thing is, again, very easy to say, very difficult to do, but be bold, be firm, because your team needs you to do that. One thing I've learned is my way, your way, is very rarely the best way. I can't think of anything that hasn't gotten better by me discussing it with my team. And I think it's, again, you need to be fairly humble on how you approach that, but I stand by it in everything I've done over the last 3 years. It's always better when I ask for input from others. I am never right the first time. Don't tell my wife. So I think I want to leave it there. As I said, my aim was to provide you a few mental cues, a little bit of a tool set as you approach this problem, as you approach that, as you approach your careers in this area. And what I would say is, just to maybe touch some of those key points, insights in context are most valuable. Where you are on your journey is probably the most important context to be aware of as you approach a new team, a new problem. And as I say, I hope you maybe get some value, 1 or 2 nuggets out of what I've shared this evening. I wish you the best of luck in your immediate problem and the best of luck in yours.
I want to give a shout out to James Ng, who was not able to make it tonight. He actually put together a lot of what you'll be seeing in terms of the data sets, the problem statement, kind of the details behind what we had envisioned for the methane reductions. I do really want to give a shout out to him for putting in that effort. I will, I guess, try to go through as best I can in detail about the technical aspect of the challenge tonight. I probably won't be able to answer all of the questions that are being thrown at me as I'm being brought on here late in the game, but I do want to go through kind of the basics here. So you'll get a problem statement sometime tonight after the main kickoff event is done. You'll get to see kind of the background and details as to what we're expecting. In terms of open source licensing here, everything is open source. So all the data that we're going to be providing you is readily available online. James has taken the time to kind of collate and put everything together in a more readable format, something that is concise as opposed to you digging through the data. But you are more than free to, if you and your group so choose, to use the original data sets versus the that we provide. There's no going to be a strict guidelines. You're only limited to this data set. It's highly encouraged you use other third-party sources that you can reference, that you can refer to as part of your, we'll call it deliverable here. There's going to be one boot camp that's going to be held next week related to deep learning with the image classification. Due to our timeline, unfortunately, we're not able to provide more boot camps than we wanted in terms of image classification. So we will keep that in mind as part of our grading process. So I think the driving message here is that we're really looking for more of the qualitative side as to what you discover with the data sets that we're going to be providing you. The competition rules are going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to outline them as part of your survival guide. Because I am kind of taking over right now. Later on, I will be, I guess, I'll put together a document or a guideline as to the submission procedures, the model performance metric. The scoring criteria is already there as part of your survival guide, but in terms of submissions and what we're looking for exactly, that may be delayed a little bit here. So I'll talk about that in a second. Communication and networking tools. If you have any questions about the data, about or either the quantitative part or the qualitative part, feel free to put those questions in the Slack channel. That's what the Slack channel is for. We will have key dates. We may or may not, depending on kind of how far people get, change them slightly. But for now, the key dates that have been supplied by you, at least at the start of the session here as part of your survival guide, will stand as is. It gives us time as organizers to kind of go through your submissions. And it also gives you time, a reasonable time, to go over the data, come up with a story, a narrative. So at some point tonight, we will post the documents on Slack. If it's too big, then we'll put them on some kind of Dropbox or SharePoint for people to review. But I will speak with the organizers after this to figure out what the best delivery approach is. Yeah, so we're looking at two different, I guess, parts to the final submission here. We want to have the quantitative challenge. That's always a fun challenge for the participants, where we're going to ask you to do certain things, and we're going to see how close you get to the actual answers. And I'll talk about that later on. But number two is kind of where most of the scoring is going to occur. It is likely the driving force in terms of basically who's going to be first, second, and third in terms of the datathon, because the case study is kind of the most important. It's how we tie together the stakeholders that are involved, how this impacts, the community as a whole. It also loops into kind of how you narrate your deliverable, how you present a story for people to understand and for people to kind of know, why is it that we're looking at this data? There's lots of data out there in the world, but how do we use this data? Why are we using this data? I think that's going to be the key driving force for your presentations. That case study at the end of the day will be a 5-minute presentation, similar to what we've done with previous datathons, acknowledging the fact that we have both people live right now at the SLB office who are attending, as well as those who are joining virtually. So to kind of make it central, we're going to ask each group by the submission deadline to submit a 5-minute video, no more than 5 minutes, please, of what your findings are. And I think there will be some guidance if you want to present some supporting documents or supporting code that you've done to kind of narrate or illustrate that story. There may be allowances to do so. I still have to figure out those details, but really we're going to be looking at your final video presentation as kind of the key driving force in terms of your findings and any kind of insight that you can give us. Next slide, please. So basically, it took us a fairly long time. I think the people in the room and the people online can attest, the organizers can attest to this. It took us a very long time to kind of figure out what kind of data that we were going to use when it comes to reducing methane emissions. There's lots of sensitivity around it, and we ended up going in the direction of the open source route. So the example that you see here is a jet propulsion laboratory system that was deployed, throughout the U.S. and they went and they took pictures, as you can see there on the lower right-hand portion of your screen. Different sites. It could be a well site. It could be an oil and gas facility. It could be a landfill. It could be some. It could be there's a dairy digester as an example. And they went to look out and they took, photos, I guess, of the emission plumes that they were seeing. And they also attached the location as well as the emission rate. So there's an actual quantifiable rate. And you'll see in the data set there, the plus or minus is pretty massive, but it's kind of the best that we have right now. And it's all open source. And we thought this would be a great way for participants to analyze available data where at least we can sort of quantify what those methane emissions are. A lot of what people do right now people and companies do right now in terms of methane emissions is they apply a factor. They'll apply a factor to, let's say, a piece of instrument, a controller, or a flaring incident. They'll use a factor, a prescribed factor, in order to quantify what that plume rate would be. That is perhaps, as we move forward, into a net zero or a no methane emissions environment, less likely to be used in the future, because there's no way for us to guarantee if that emission factor is correct or not. So there's now a lot of research, a lot of effort being put in to say, I'm seeing a plume, what is the actual emissions that are coming out of this? And it could be more than what the emission factor is calculated as is. So that's what we're trying to do in this whole datathon, is to go, emission factors aren't enough. What more can we do? And can we use the collective knowledge of our analytical skills, as well as the ever-growing data science world, to see if we can better predict and actually model some of these emission plumes and the associated rates. So here we're going to be attaching kind of the data, the CSV files that you'll get, along with a number of low resolution pictures that James has prepared for us. And you can see we're looking at an example of a site with a plume and without a plume. And there's a lot of things you can do in terms of classification, like, is there a plume happening? Where is the plume happening? Where's the source of that plume? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to open it up to the participants to really identify and see if that is something that can be done. How accurate can we get to it? And you'll see in the data set the quantification of that rate, for example, is it is pretty significant. So this is kind of what we're looking for in terms of data. And so here's the weighting. So here's the thing that I've been talking about, is that we're really looking at, as you can see here, at the analysis and insights, as well as the presentation of the case study, along with your EDA. That comprises of 70% of your mark. The actual, more fun task of seeing how close you can get to certain predicted actual results, it will only constitute about 30% of your total grading. So we're really looking for that story. And one question I get a lot is, I don't know anything about data science. I don't know how to code. I don't know how to do certain things. I'm not going to be very useful. I would challenge that mindset. I think some of the best presentations that we've seen incorporates your own background, as well as your ability to analyze data. A lot of the people sitting in the room right now and people online have great analytical skills. They're able to tie in third-party information, news sources, things that they've learned about in the past to create a cohesive story. And we really want to see that. We're giving you this data. It's very open-ended. We haven't given you anything to go towards. There's no specific direction that we want you to take. We just want to go, here's all this data that somebody has produced, an institution has produced. What do we do about this data? And can we gain any insight into this data? If you're really good at, making concise presentations, if you're really good at, graphical creation, that is another strong suit as well. A lot of the individuals that will be grading your case studies or looking at case studies in general, they don't have a technical background. How well can you distill all this technical jargon and information and present it to us in a 5-minute case study is a skill in itself. So I would challenge people who don't think that they're able to provide much into the competition to kind of rethink that mindset and go look at the weighting, look at what we're actually looking for, look at the stakeholders that are involved. And I think you'll enjoy the Datathon challenge as much as we will. Next slide, please. So these are kind of the rules. I think we had outlined them in our initial kickoff meeting. So team size is at least 2 people, no more than 7. We will have a Kumo space tomorrow to talk about the forming of teams if you haven't found any yet. Plagiarism, just don't do it. Frameworks, library, software, please just indicate what you've been using as part of your coding, if that is part of your submission as well. Open source, so all the data that we're giving you today is open source. It is readily available online in its original native format, but there'll be a guide to indicate which documents you should reference as part of your submission as well. We're not taking any intellectual property from this. You're free to distribute it and share it with other institutions or your friends, family. Let's see here. Social media disclosure. I think there may be, as part of your submission, I believe SPE will be able to showcase your presentation, be able to refer to it. So just keep that in mind. In case you have any issues with the disclosure of personal information, you can let the organizers know. I like the very last one, rules can change at any time. That is totally going to be me. As I am taking over the technical portion last minute, there may be some changes in terms of rules or the direction that we want to take, but that should be no more than a week's time from today. So if there are any changes, we will discuss them internally. So as part of the that discussion will be the quantitative submission, which I technically still have to sort out, but we'll get that done here sooner rather than later.
Hello, everyone. Very nice to be here. My name is Luis Acosta. I am a petroleum engineer by background. Actually, I worked most of my career as a reservoir engineer in different roles. I worked for 17 years at Shell in different countries, different roles, different positions. And today I am working as a data scientist for the government of Canada. I'm working in the data science division. Most of my team is located actually in Ottawa. But today I'm not gonna talk. I know it's a bit late. I'm just gonna keep it brief, but I'm not gonna be talking about my journey. Specifically today, I wanted to share a bit about my experience participating in the last Datathon, which happened, I think it was 2021, 2 years ago. So it was a little bit more about sharing my experience and what I gained. I feel I gained from participating in this type of events, which I would summarize as pretty much 3 things. First of all, for me, it has been a lot about building a portfolio in data science. Secondly, about networking and building relationships. And I would say thirdly, it's about the practical insights that you get while getting your hands dirty solving a problem. In my particular case, I will share some kind of a story, something I learned, but I will leave it at those 3 things. First of all, regarding data science portfolio, as I was starting my journey in data science and talking with computer science, data engineers, and people in the field. I realized when you're applying for a job, it's not only about the courses, the credentials, the training. It's a lot about not showing just your resume, but having a portfolio of projects, really kind of a list of cool projects that you have done that you can discuss with potential employers. And many of the data scientists I know, they have kind of a fancy websites listing all the projects and GitHub repositories with kind of all the code and problems that they have solved. As I was starting in this journey, actually the SP provided kind of a great opportunity of actually working in real life projects that I have put, and those were kind of the start of my portfolio, kind of working in the SP mentorship program. I participated in the Datathon in 2020, the Doc Datathon, also in the 2021. And I found many times in interviews and conversations, I would refer back to the projects I did. I sometimes, even during interviews, I would be talking about some of the Datathon projects that I did, how I solved problems, what kind of challenges I faced. So I found it was a great opportunity. And of course, you're doing this, and at the same time, you're having fun, you're meeting people, you have lots of pre-training, resources, tools that are available for you. So that kind of helped even more in this kind of a learning journey. Secondly, for me, I think it was about the networking and the relationships that you feel, and especially coming from oil and gas into a totally new domain. You don't know really that many people and how this field works. And I had the chance, of course, to work. We were a team of 4. All of them came from oil and gas. We had someone working in drilling engineering, Margot, who is a geophysicist, myself, a reservoir engineer. But I think we had in common this passion for data and for learning. And I think that we helped each other along the journey, kind of complementing with other skills. And we have kind of developed some kind of a friendship and relationship. But especially it was very important connecting with some people, for instance, in the training courses or in the committee, kind of relationships that I continued. And for instance, after the event, I would connect with some of the organizers or the people for coffee or for a Zoom chat, giving me some tips and advice that actually is from people who are already in the data science field. So gave me some kind of practical tips and training and guidance about how to progress and develop my skills. So that was very important for me. Finally, I would say about the practical tips and trainings, I think that if I could just take one of them, I'm going to take a kind of a short story. When I participated in the Datathon in 2020, it was the Doc Datathon. I actually joined. I learned about the event just the same day. I just learned about the event the same day, and I participated with 2 friends. And I knew nothing about what was going to happen. I knew very little about data analytics. And Basically, I just kind of reacted and was working during the 2-3 weeks that lasted the event, just trying to commit with the deadlines. And one of the things when we were kind of recording the video submission the night before the deadline, I just realized, wow, it would have been nice to be putting together this story, not now, just a few hours before the deadline. It would have been nice to have this maybe 1 week or even 2 weeks ago. And it's not only about kind of having fancy graphics and animations or articulate story. It's more about focusing or kind of what the Sam was telling at the beginning, kind of developing that context, really making sure that you understand the problem and doing all the pre-reading, trying to understand what the problem you're trying to solve, and more or less visualizing what kind of a story you're going to be telling. If you have that kind of a vision in advance of the story that you want to tell, that's going to save you time. For instance, I found that I was kind of spending too much time solving kind of technical problems and wasting time in rabbit holes that actually were not adding anything to those 5 minutes on the video, that were not going to show up there. And probably there were some other stuff that I should have investigated a bit more about the context, kind of the story investigation, how this is going to help in the business, how the solution that I'm proposing is going to help, that kind of a context that would have made a difference. I think it would have focused my efforts and be kind of a more cost effective. So in summary, I would say I'm very thankful and I appreciate team, Dave, and all the people who participate and donate their time to make these types of events happen. I think it's a great opportunity, and for me, it has been about the ability to develop a project portfolio, developing connections, and as I mentioned as well, having some practical learnings, as the importance of having early on context, having early on a story to tell, and refine it as it goes along. So I would say that it's in addition to these benefits, I think that there's a little bit of the adrenaline rush as when you're stuck coding and basically you finally get it to run properly. Kind of that adrenaline rush in general, I think you also get it. It's just like a marathon. Once you finish, you're not really going for the gold medal or kind of a prize. It's just the experience of making it through the finish line. It's kind of a lot of adrenaline and it's a very pleasant experience. So I would just conclude, I really commend you guys for taking the extra time and working extra nights, long shifts to make this happen. I can guarantee that it's going to be worth it and it's going to be a great experience. I commend you for that.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Margot. For myself, my experience, like with data started during my first job here in Canada, where I was processing some geophysical data, and it was a very tedious process. And I decided to start learning Python just to be able to automate some of that work. And I started studying Python by myself, then joined a master in data science. And some of my classmates were talking about joining that Datathon. So I was like, well, why not? I don't really know anyone doing that, but I'm going to try and find a team. And so we were all contacted by our teammate Mari, and she was just building up a team and got us all together with different backgrounds. And so I think it was really a great opportunity. It was not something I had never worked with geothermal energy, and I haven't worked in oil and gas. I was in the mining industry. So it was like just a great experience to have some domain knowledge that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. But also, like Luis said, it's everyone has something to bring to the group. We had someone who was more into the data cleaning and preparation, and then someone doing more project management, making sure that we were doing everything in time. So I think that was, for me, the biggest point about this Datathon was also like seeing how how different people can fit together and form a team, and a great team at that. I also think like our biggest strength also was probably that we all took it seriously. We started, for some of us, with almost no Python experience, some of others with no oil and gas experience. And so it was a learning opportunity for everyone. And yeah, I think that was also the occasion to meet people. As a new immigrant in the country, it can be hard to find ways to network. And so it was just a very, very great opportunity. So I'm very thankful for everyone who's helped organizing it.
So the question was, how did you deal with debugging?
Well, I think that from my experience, when you are coding, we didn't start from scratch. And actually, during the training, during the previous weeks, there were several templates that were provided in our case, we were analyzing well data. And there were some sessions by Marcelo where he provided already some templates about how to run a regression model for neural network. And basically those models had already been tested. So it was more about kind of tweaking and twisting the model just to connect them to our data. That simplified the problem quite a bit. So basically we were trying as much as possible. We were not kind of starting completely from scratch. We were starting from the templates that were available to us. In my particular case, at the same time, I was also doing the master's in data science at the University of Calgary. So I also got some of the templates in Python for setting up a random forest model, for instance, or XGBoost models. I already had kind of a templates how to do that and how to do the parameter tuning, but I found the templates that we were getting here from Marcelo were actually very useful.
Yeah, I think debugging in the end is just being persistent and try to find help. I know that the Python community is usually very open. Most questions you have, probably someone already asked it before, and yeah, it's mostly getting help from others.